It's important that council members work together in a spirit of trust and respect for one another. There are often differing points of view on how to move forward on things. And I, myself, am always available to any member of council who is interested in talking to me about political strategy. That sounds very fancy, but just how to manage things, how to work them through council and so on, whether or not I agree or disagree with it. In fact, on the Southwest BRT motion, I suggested to Councillor Farkas on a number of occasions that I would do all I could to make sure that he got a free and fair debate on it, what the deadlines would be, and how quickly he needed to move on it. So given that the advice I gave to him was to move very, very quickly on this, I suppose that's why he felt he had to bring that notice of motion forward that fast.
I heard from a lot of people this morning about the sliding scale and how important that is. Can you just clarify if that is something that is on the chopping block?
Administration's recommendation, their one and only recommendation for an increase to the budget, is in fact to fully fund that program.
What are your thoughts? You said that you had some information that not all council members were privy to. What are your thoughts, given the information that you've had, on administration's plan to make up the shortfall?
Well, first of all, let me say this is not a normal course of events. Usually, council and the public have a one step deeper level of detail on what the cuts are. And I asked for that and I received it, and then when I asked for it to be distributed widely, they realized that because the cuts this year are so surgical, it really is one position here and one position there, that it wasn't fair to have those out in public before council makes that decision. Those are people's jobs. So I get it. So I'm really pushing council to ask some more questions. So for example, you just heard in Calgary neighborhoods that the very blunt statement was this could have an impact on at-risk people. But in fact, the cuts they're contemplating do not have an impact on at-risk people. It has to do with better aligning workloads, the number of kids on probation and things like that. So council needs to understand that. Now, to answer your actual question, yes, I'm quite comfortable. There's one or two small areas, one or two bus routes that I really want to understand why'd you pick that one. That sort of thing. But by and large, I think administration has done a nice job of taking a least harm approach, finding ways that you can do cuts that will have the least impact on people. But I'll give you one example. I say every year that the number one complaint in my office is about nothing that is ever covered in the media: weeds and dandelions. And if we cut the mowing of the city boulevards from 5 times a year to 4 times a year, I can guarantee you that will result in a lot of complaints.
You didn't seem to be very impressed by the presentations of people who were advocating cuts to the budget. We got into a discussion with the CTF, and
sometimes I got to have a bit of fun.
Exactly. So, but what was your problem with the presentations that were given on the side by those people who wanted?
I've got no problem with informed discussion on either side. I do have a problem with people who repeat misstatements all the time, such as where the business taxes have been, for example, or the fact that the city does not look at contracting out as a regular part of our everyday business. So I think that's really important, and I am wishing and praying and hoping that especially people whose full-time job this is, to investigate and criticize the city, would actually come up with real answers instead of randomly saying, you planted trees in my dog park, without checking to see if there were ever trees there before.
More solutions of where to cut as opposed to just critiquing.
That's right. Solutions are always helpful. And if for those who say, well, that's government's job, yeah, I agree. And that's why we're doing the zero-based review process. That's why we've gone through line by line in public at Priorities and Finance Committee these eye-glazing conversations about each department and whether or not we should or should not be continuing services, whether we should contract them out, what we should stop doing. And that's a big chunk of the nearly $500 million of efficiencies and savings we found over the last 5 years.
Do you think there will ever be an appetite to maybe have even a reduction in city employees, which is a big ticket item in the operating budget?
Well,
it would save a lot of money.
It's easy to say reduction in city employees.
No, city employee wages.
Well, in wages, sorry. Remember
true.
that we live in a unionized world, right? And so we always have, I can't just do that. And even when someone comes up and says, totally reform the pensions, I can't do that. That has to be a negotiation with the actual workers. And certainly you've seen that the biggest chunk of the savings in this budget come from workforce adjustments, by far the biggest bunch. And those are conversations that we've got to continue to have. They're conversations, frankly, that the province and the federal government also have to have with their workers.
What do you mean by it's a unionized environment? Could you not just tell the unions, as was done in the 90s, this is how much money we have, You decide what to do. Either take this decrease or you'll have to deal with the workforce.
I seem to remember a 51-day transit strike that resulted from that conversation. So these are always the kinds of conversations we need to have with people.
Can I switch gears a bit?
Yep.
Have you seen the latest report on the opioid deaths in Alberta?
I haven't. Can you give me the top line numbers?
They were saying 40% increase. Calgary obviously seeing the highest numbers for increases. What's your response?
Well, as I've said for many, many, many months now, the opioid situation is an absolute crisis. There's no question that we are in crisis. We lose more people every week to opioid, every year I should say, to opioid overdose than we lose to car accidents, than we lose to violent crime combined. And this is something that is affecting families in every community in this city. So we have to continue to work on all four pillars of the approach here, and that is prevention, enforcement, treatment, and harm reduction. So I was happy to see some more money going towards treatment recently, and of course we've opened the harm reduction site at the Sheldon Schumer Center, and apparently that's going very well and has saved a number of lives already. So we need to continue to do this, and our ultimate goal has to be keep people alive and help them get better.
And obviously it's all three levels of government that need this, but what should the city be doing? What should the city's role be in this potential?
So our job is really in three parts. Well, actually, it's in all four of those things. So when you think about prevention, as you were just hearing the budget debate, we have to make sure that we are investing in social programs that help keep people off of the drugs in the first place and how we manage that. When you think about enforcement, of course, that's a huge part of our job and a huge part of the Calgary Police Service work. Treatment is something that we need to advocate for better funding of, and we also need to make sure that it's easy for organizations that want to open treatment beds to be able to open them through zoning and so on, and things that we actually have control of. And finally, in harm reduction, we've been partners with the province in developing supervised consumption sites, and we'll continue to work on that.
Is CPS seeing extra stresses because of this?
Absolutely. And you'll hear that after the break, that this is a major, major problem that they're having to deal with, and one of the reasons they're feeling so stretched. Okay, thanks everybody.
Let me ask you about the police budget. You have some concerns about their plans to lease the body cameras versus buying?
Yeah, by and large, I think that their request is very reasonable. I just really need to see the numbers on the body cams. When I heard that it costs $1 million every 3 years to purchase them, or $2 million a year to lease them, clearly we don't have the whole number. So let's just get the whole number.
Yeah, they were talking about storage would cost them maybe $2 million a year.
Yeah, if that's the case, then the whole thing makes sense. I just need to see those numbers. That strikes me as a lot for storage, but as the prices of storage have been plummeting, that said, that's a lot of videos, so maybe that does make sense.
You didn't vote on it tonight. When are you going to actually deal with it? Like, why didn't you cast a ballot on it now?
You see, you missed my long conversation about process early this morning. So right now we're in questions for admit. When we finish with all the questions sometime tomorrow, Councillor Chu will move the budget. Once the budget is on the floor, then people can move amendments.
In his presentation, the chief painted a pretty bleak picture, like showing all the graphs and talking about this is up and this and that. Do you think it's that bad for Calgarians out on the streets right now?
No, it's not. Calgary remains an extraordinarily safe city. Every street in the community remains extraordinarily safe. Crime rates are much lower than they were when I was a kid growing up here. But we have seen some spikes, particularly in 2015 and 16. Most of those have leveled off or started to go down in 17, but not all. Much of this is related to the economic downturn. Much of it is related to the fentanyl crisis. And I'm quite sympathetic to the need of addressing those two things.
Do you think the need is for more bodies on the street, or is it looking at things like prevention, like what some other councillors were suggesting?
There's no magic bullet here. Obviously, prevention, when it works extraordinarily well, but it doesn't replace the boots on the street. And so you need to have the right balance, which I think Calgary's done a very good job of finding over the years.
And we shouldn't be shocked that they're coming forward, because Rick Hansen warned us of this a couple of years ago, saying we're okay for now, but in a couple of years we'll be back.
Yeah, that was very much the plan, right? We were hoping that this would stretch out through the 4 years of the budget cycle before we talked again, because slowing down the growth, like in police, like in healthcare, and every area of government spending is actually very helpful in the long run. And the one thing I need to say is that typically if police commissions or police departments are asked, how much money do you want? They come back with the world, right? Because councils everywhere will never not give the police what they want. And in this case, I actually think both the Commission and the service have been very, very responsible in saying, look, we're paring this down to what is actually needed.
How convinced are you that they have found every bit of savings that they can? Their managed costs they've gone as far as they could go.
No, if I had had time to ask, I would have asked another question, which is, when are they planning on instituting a zero-based review like other departments have? I suspect there's probably a little more room there, but that doesn't obviate the need to hire more officers.
Have you heard anything about the latest public art drama that's making the rounds on Twitter right now? Do you know anything about it?
I've read what's on Twitter.
If what this comedian in the UK is saying is correct, which is that her photo and other comedians' photos were used without permission by an artist, do you have any thoughts?
I never thought I would be standing in a scrum answering a question that starts with, if this comedian in the UK...
It's been that kind of day.
It has been that. It has absolutely been that kind of day. It's not the weirdest question I've answered today. Look, obviously, as soon as I saw that, I flipped it to city administration, said investigate, investigate, investigate. So we'll see what comes out of that investigation. I do think, as I've said before, that the time really is ripe for us to have a very thoughtful conversation about the goals and the tactics of the public art program. So when you think about $20,000 for this kind of art installation, it went to a local but world-renowned artist. But I also go, well, what would $20,000 have done to the career of an emerging artist? What could we have done with that? And I think those are the questions we really need to ask. What's the role of public art in placemaking? What's the role of public art in being used strategically to enhance the city and to enhance the careers of artists? So these are questions I'm really looking forward to addressing in the new year.
Going back to the police budget, the administration mentioned that, in its document had cuts, potential cuts for the force, and yet we knew that this ask was coming. So why is it that administration was doing one thing when we knew the ask was coming?
It's a good question. It's because everyone was asked to hold the line on their budget. Every department was. And then they were also told, if you really give us the hold the line budget, and that is what the recommendation will be, but if you think the hold the line budget won't work and you have an additional ask, bring it forward. And there were only 2 additional asks brought forward. One is the low-income transit pass and one is the police. The low-income transit pass was A, smaller, but B, directly under the control of the city, and C, really is about providing service to people who are using it right now. So that's why administration incorporated that into their ask, and they thought it was appropriate for council to debate the police thing separately because it was such a larger number, and council really does not have the right to direct the operational issues of the police. They can only do the final number, yes or no.